great. I guess it's good to be back. I mean, when you go for a few weeks without a dose of dopeness, that's a lot, Trae. I'm just saying. It's really good to see you again.
Yeah, you as well.
Yeah.
And, I love that you've been out here doing the work. And so we just appreciate you being able to make time to be here with us today.
Busy
But
time,
I want to talk about something outside of Seattle News, Views, and Brews for a second. We both got to see the brilliance that is the Wiz.
Yeah.
And I have to give you time to tell me more about your experience.
It's a personal experience for me in a lot of different ways. I remember it when I was a kid, very, very briefly, I guess, just seeing it as I must have been 5 or 6 or something when I checked it out on TV, etc. But it was a visceral thing for me. I went to the theater, brought my daughter for the first time. She'd never been to the Fifth Ave. That was very cool. And we had a connection in that Nikki Womack, who is the associate choreographer for the show. Nikki, shout out to you. She did such a fantastic job working, of course, with the other folks involved there. But we were just so blown away by the work that happened with the dance that was going on there, with the music that was going on. B. Russell just blew it out as the Wiz. The performances, they really kind of just kept on hitting me throughout the whole show. I mean, it wouldn't stop, right? So anyway, it had that personal connection because Nikki's a friend of our family, and it was just a really cool family tradition. I thought very cool. I remember reading it in the program. Maybe it's not the traditional, Christmas holiday kind of thing you would see in the theater, but let's try out a new tradition. And why not? I mean, it's a great, great entertaining show. Couldn't get enough of Tap Dancing Tin Man. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I don't want to oversell it, but I think I already did. You got to go see it.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
I agree. And I love being able to celebrate the excitement because it takes me back to my childhood.
Sure.
There's something so special about live theater. It's very different than, going to a movie or something. You think, oh, these movie stars are Hollywood. They don't live here. To be able to celebrate folks who, some of them coming from right here.
That's right.
And, showcasing their dynamic talent and skill. And for me, that's like, man, you're right here. There's something so connected about you being on stage and me being able to watch you do your thing.
Yeah.
So I absolutely loved it. Can't wait to go again.
Yeah.
It was snowing when we were supposed to go this past weekend. So I'm trying to get there again, but I love this show. And I'm so glad that you guys had a great time as well.
And I don't want to mispronounce her first name, Kataka, as Dorothy. Is that how you pronounce it? A Star is Born.
Yeah.
Wow, what a voice. Great talent.
Amazing.
Really impressive.
Yeah, definitely something for y'all to catch. Make sure you guys go to Fifth Avenue and go to their website. Get these tickets. This is, like you said, it's a great way to celebrate family time. And I love that your daughter went and I'm sure she enjoyed it.
Oh, she had a blast. Yeah, and it's a cool family show. And I think a lot of the themes that are in that show, talking about family coming back together, and friends kind of coming together in different ways. It's fantastic and super funny too. That's kind of left out of it, but there's so many funny lines in there. I was laughing, I was crying. I had a really, really great experience with it.
I'm so glad. Well, Brian, like I said, you've been very busy and there's a lot of things to cover, particularly because I know that budget session was huge.
Just wrapped up last week.
Yeah, just wrapping up. I really want to kind of dive into that a little bit. Tell us a little bit where we are now at this point.
Yeah, we're done. The budget has been signed. That $7.4 billion package that the council's been working on for several months is actually now done and delivered. So now is the part where we kind of pull apart the different pieces that are going to come out of that. This week on the show, we're talking more specifically about some of the impacts on homelessness, which is a huge concern for everybody in our area. And specifically, we were talking about a report from the HOPE team. This is the Homeless Outreach Provider Ecosystem. I think I have that acronym right, but this is a team that's set up by the city that actually deals with some of these different encampments that are out there that are unauthorized. And this is an interesting point of tension, if you will, because the HOPE team is the team that actually goes out there on the day that cleanup or sweep happens. The other agencies that are involved, like the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, they don't want to necessarily have their teams associated with that sweep time. So someone's got to do it. And it turns into the city's HOPE team that is involved with that. And that's an interesting thing to think about there in terms of how that outreach goes. But in this budget, the mayor had proposed earlier, a couple of months ago, to put some dollars towards the HOPE team such that they could have a I guess, a regional impact. And I'm talking within the city regional impact. Let's make sure we've got some folks up on the north side, make sure we got some folks on the south side, east side, west side, all that kind of coverage. The city looked at that, excuse me, the city council looked at it and said, okay, see what you're doing here, but we really kind of want to go all hands on deck with the work the King County Regional Homelessness Authority is doing. So we're going to divert that money that you want to put in the Hope Team and put it over here. That doesn't mean the Hope Team's going away or anything like that, but its work will not have that expanded role that the mayor had wanted it to have. So I think the city is trying to recognize that the Regional Homelessness Authority is doing some really good work, and they want to continue to support that. The RHA had actually asked for a lot more in terms of support from the city. So the city didn't give all the RHA wanted there, but did give a significant amount to try to continue that work. And so what I thought was interesting, and just to go down this Hope Team thing for one more second here, the Hope Team was actually supposed to make a presentation to the Seattle City Council this week. They had a report. It was actually on the docket as of just a couple days ago. They ended up pulling that report. I'm not exactly sure why. I don't know what wasn't prepared, but I was actually able to download it and look at it. And the very interesting part here, and this is where it gets a little confusing for people, you have all these different agencies that the RHA deals with, these social service agencies that actually do the outreach. They go out there, teams like Reach, things of this nature, they go out there, they go to these camps, they have this by name list now, and they're saying, okay, you need this. Oh, I remember you. We're going to hook you up with this. Okay, you need this over here. Anyway, they've got this by name list, but some of the challenges involved with that are trying to make sure that these different agencies who are doing the work are actually using that list, adding names to that list. And this whole issue of data management, it's a major, major part of what the RHA is about. And very importantly, as the RHA looks to potentially renew the contracts of these social service providers next year, they're going to say, okay, where's the data? What have you done here? What have you done here? And so the metric that they've been using a lot of times of, hey, how many shelter referrals have you put out there? They're saying, wait a minute, all these guys are doing shelter referrals, or maybe they're not. We're not so sure in our data. But is the point really about having the referral, or is it about getting someone actually inside? They take that referral and then they use it. And so what the RHA, and I think the city is going through right now, is this whole idea of how do we manage our data, and how do we do this in such a way that we're fair to these different social service agencies, but how do we measure them properly to say, okay, you did a good job, you did a good job, you get your contract back, you get yours back. It's a really confusing kind of thing, and I hope I explained a little piece of it to you there, Trae, but that's kind of where we're going right now with the homelessness budget for the city, at least a brief part of it, and then the homelessness budget for the RHA overall.
Well, this is really a topic that I love to get into, and I really appreciate your insight on this, Brian, because it does get confusing. When I hear this, the best thing that I can deduce is collaboration is key here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you are going to have, okay, so we got King County Regional Homelessness Authority here, right? We got Seattle's City Hope Team here, right? Hope Team is kind of doing more of the sweeps, and maybe they're doing some of this work is overlapping, because I don't want to just say that they're only doing sweeps.
Of course not.
So maybe they're doing some outreach too. But KCRHA is doing, that's what they're primarily doing, is outreach and trying to get people services. Now, that also involves a third tier, because it's not the KCRHA staff that's going out to do this particular outreach. Right. So now they've contracted with third-party agencies to make that work happen. Those agencies then and KCRHA all need to be connected with whatever shelters they're referring people to in order for the data to be more concrete and solid. If you know that this agency that is contracted by RHA has given this one individual a referral to go to this, these maybe 3 or 4 shelters. Maybe it's some of a wide variety. They have to then have contact with those 4 shelters to say, okay, over the last week, I've referred, 200 people to your space. In particular, how many have showed up? Let me get that name data. There needs to be a cycle of how this information is shared in order for us to close the gap. And really, it would dilute the confusion that exists out there.
I think it would too. And I hear exactly what you're saying. And I should point out that this work is going on, trying to make sure this happens. The interesting point is this, though, Trae, when these referrals are made, and let's say a person who's homeless actually goes to one of these places, some of these spots, these shelters or whatever else, don't necessarily have the staff in place to say, okay, let me make sure we're getting this in the computer with all the paperwork and what's your name and all that kind of stuff. It's mainly, it's like, let's just get you in the door. This is an emergency. And that's good, right? We want to get those people in the door. But I would have to say, just as important is making sure we get that data recorded too. So I think a part of it is making sure these different providers are kind of up to speed on what the RHA wants. That's going to take some time. And I know that Mark Dones has talked a lot about functional zero homelessness in downtown Seattle sometime in 2023. I really want that to happen, but this is the big issue I think they're dealing with right now, making sure that their providers are actually coming through on these names or whatever else, and that they actually have the staffing and the ability to do this. Because again, you want people inside, right? That's the emergency. But the other piece to that is, okay, now we need to measure how this happens so that these different agencies are accountable. Hopefully these people who are checking into shelter are accountable too for themselves and can actually connect with services as they need to. But this whole issue of data management is a big deal. Getting everybody on the same page and using the same system, that's a lot. And that's kind of what's happening right now.
Yeah, this is why I think there needs to be a huge investment in the infrastructure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great to have all of these agencies,
Yeah.
and those agencies provide jobs. I get it,
Yep.
but also too, a part of where I think this work needs to go is a connected infrastructure.
Yeah.
And these agencies, these like shelters, homeless centers, whatever, resource centers,
Yeah.
they need to be resourced
Yeah.
in a way that really connects to the issue.
Yeah.
So this is really interesting. And
Yeah.
and then I go, as we develop new systems, I'm
Yeah.
thinking about what King County Council Member Gamai Zahalai is working on with these crisis
It's a
centers.
big deal.
I think about how that also connects to what we're talking about in terms of
Yeah.
resources,
Right.
and another opportunity for those who need the help to get it when they need it.
Yeah.
But yet still, how do we measure success?
Yeah.
How do we measure if this is working, particularly because these are, tax dollars
Yep.
oftentimes going into the
Yep.
funding for these things. And we can't
yeah.
just keep having, another agency created when they're not speaking to one another.
That's true. And I guess what I will say is, it's not like this work isn't happening. It's starting to gel, and we're seeing some signs of progress from the RHA. I should point that out. Their emergency housing voucher program that they put in place during COVID, et cetera, that has had twice the amount of responses just about any of the other major cities around the U.S. That's a big deal that they're
Wow.
able to get that partnership. They have people who have lived experience with homelessness who are working as outreach workers out on the streets. And I should point out, you mentioned earlier, it's not necessarily the staff of KCRHA. There are some staff members who are doing this outreach
That's
work,
good.
but there's a lot of it going on with these different service providers, which is a concern. So this work is happening. And I was actually just at a meeting this morning of this HCC, the Housing Command Center. Usually they meet over at the Emergency Operations Center for the city. It's kind of like, a war room type of atmosphere in there. And it's pretty cool. What I noticed in this meeting was a lot of different people were at the table. You had the Downtown Seattle Association. You had the Partnership for Zero. Those are the people who are providing some philanthropic dollars to try to make this work and solve the problem of homelessness as best they can. You've got people who represent different shelters there. You've got people who represent some of these outreach teams, the Hope team as well. So what I heard around that table was people are getting engaged here, and these different partners are literally at the table. They're meeting every day to try to work on these types of issues. So I'm enthused by the idea that these people are coming together. I'm not 100% sure about this goal of zero functional downtown homelessness in Seattle, but and we talk about it on the podcast tonight, I do, with Kevin Schofield. It's this kind of vicious or hopefully virtuous cycle where, okay, we're trying to solve this problem. We need some more dollars to do it. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. We need some more resources, or however you want to put it. We need some more resources to do that, but you need to trust us first before we get those dollars. So how do we get that trust and do it in a timely way such that that cycle continues? So the KCRHA is doing its best to try to show some results. As I said, I think there are some early results that look good. The fact that the city of Seattle is investing, it's about $500 million into affordable housing over the next 2 years. I think that's going to help in terms of resources that are out there. But again, this is one of those situations where this next year of 2023, there's going to be a lot of scrutiny on the RHA after having a lot of trouble getting started. You remember, it took a long time for Mark Dones to be the CEO to actually decide that piece of it. he's finally they're starting to hit their stride a little bit better. And I think next year is really the year when a lot of people who might be frustrated right now, and they have every right to be, they're going to say, okay, what are the results that we have in hand?
Well, I also too want to acknowledge. I'm so glad we're diving into this.
Yeah.
I want to acknowledge that I am glad that Seattle City Council recognized a need to resource KCRHA
Yeah.
more. I think that KCRHA has done some innovative strategies already that have proven successful.
Yep.
So it's great to hear that. And
Yeah.
for me, this is about, okay, the next level of it, that
Mhm.
kind of connectivity that we're talking about. How do we fill those voids? How do they ensure that, infrastructure is being created across the board that allows for the infrastructure pieces to all speak to one another?
Yeah, yeah.
Because that is something that oftentimes is the burden of somebody who's receiving services. And I'll tell you this. A few years ago, I was homeless. Like,
Mhm.
I was actually homeless for several months with my sons. And I'm grateful that I have family out here who wouldn't just allow me to be in my car
Yeah.
or whatever. But
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that we didn't spend nights in my car
Yeah.
or, what. So that piece is real for me. And I realized, as a person who was on the other side of it, I said to myself, man, this is no fun for those who are experiencing it.
No.
And it's the burdens on them to be like, okay, from this agency to this agency, they were taking my information, Brian.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
were like, we need to make sure that we're
That's right.
documenting you being
Yep.
here,
Yep.
all of that. So maybe it changed during the pandemic, I understand.
Yeah.
But also too, oftentimes we have to think about somebody who is in need going through these different
Oh, yeah.
systems. The different systems aren't talking to
The
one
energy
another.
it takes to do
It's
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like I'm constantly having to be vulnerable to tell you why I'm even here.
Right.
And I
Right.
have to pour my entire story out to you
Sure.
just for you to create a file on me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why can't there be a universal file on me
Yeah.
so that when my kids are getting McKinney-Vento, for instance,
Yeah.
that then triggers a bunch of other things to say, okay,
Yep.
this family obviously
Yeah.
may need XYZ.
Yeah.
I had to go from one agency to another, and I had to constantly do that over
Yeah.
and over again. So that's what I'm saying in
Yeah.
terms of like my own lived experience speaks to
Right.
this,
I hear you, and I thank you for sharing that with me. That's a lot to share, and I appreciate you saying it. I guess what I would say with this, I think a lot of these workers that are out on the street, they're sort of balancing this idea to, okay, the emergency, let's get people inside. They also want to respect the privacy of the people they're dealing with to an extent. But then we come back to this point of, okay, how are we going to get you help? And I will say, I think I'm very sorry that you went through the experience that you did. But in comparison with a lot of people who are on the street, maybe living in vehicles or whatever else, they don't have even a scrap of those kind of resources. Some people that are living on the street don't even have proper identification. They call them not on paper in a lot of times. And so just think about that. Okay, wait, you don't have an ID? How are we going to actually get you into this place where you're going to stay? I mean, for Seattle Channel, I did this a couple weeks ago. Talked to a guy who, and this was pretty cool, talked to a guy who was living in a tent under an overpass near T-Mobile, right? He connected with an outreach worker from KCRHA. And over the course of that day, we actually cleaned up his tent and all that, put the cardboard over there, all that kind of stuff. All right, we're moving out. Got on the light rail, went up to the U District. And over the course of a day, it took several hours for a lot of this paperwork to get through, but he was in a place. He was in an apartment there, an affordable living place. KCRHA is paying the first year worth of rent there, but it was like, whoa, check out what happened to this guy, going through some drug issues and whatever else, but he actually has a place to stay, has figured out a job. And so these are the different things that these outreach workers are able to do. The whole issue there is, okay, that's one great success story. How do we multiply that by thousands? And that's the continuing challenge, I guess, we're talking about here, Trae.
It really is. And I just love being able to dive into this, Brian. Thank you so much. I mean, in the last couple minutes, I mean, what else can folks expect on the episode tonight?
Yeah, thanks. We're diving into this homeless issue quite a bit. We're talking about this whole concept of the Partnership for Zero and the whole idea to have zero functional homelessness. We talk a little bit about what that is in 2023 in downtown Seattle. So we're talking about that a little bit more. Kevin actually had a really interesting deep dive on what it means to prosecute a former president. We're talking about a lot of that in the headlines right now with former President Trump. So he had a really good piece about that I wanted to draw people's attention to. But there's a ton going on with the show. Oh, I should also point out the Seattle City Council is making permanent this whole idea for these street side cafes, etc., the sidewalk cafes. We're diving into that a little bit too. Some of the different paperwork that's going on there. So there's a lot to trail here. I really appreciate people tuning in. 7:00 tonight, Seattle News, Views, and Brews, right here on Converge. If you want to hit me up, at Callanan Seattle. That's the way to do it on Twitter. And Trae, once again, I thank you for having me here.
Wow. I'm so glad that you got to come in the studio today.
Too.
Hey, Curtis knows every time I'm like, oh man, I can be talking to Brian so much about this topic. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure. Appreciate your knowledge. Appreciate you sharing.
Back at you, Trae. Thank you.
Absolutely. You guys